wonderful to be with you all. I really thank Ambedkar King Study Circle for having initiated this series of talks and in a way bridging the communication between science and tech folks and the social scientists. In a way, what you call a STEM, I think we need to add yes to it, social science or social science and humanities. Should be STEMs or STEMs, whatever. So we need, as of now, it is just science, technology, engineering, and math. That's precisely the reason I want to talk about how Brahmanism, Casteism has spread across the world now, both through science and technology, as well as through social sciences and humanities. So I'm going to take stock of what we, the social scientists and humanities people, have done. And I'm going to be really critical. So please feel free to raise your questions. So here we go. I have my PowerPoint here. The plan is I'm going to, keeping the Cisco case in mind, I want to talk about something about historically 1920s court case in India, and then one in the US, 1920s case, to talk about how kind of Brahmanism has come about in the 1920s, and then move into 2020s to think about the interconnections between IITs, IIMs, and the tech jobs in the US with a lot of whatever little bit I know. And then I want to use some images of what's going on in India to connect with, the back and forth, local, global connection of Brahmanism in perpetuating social segregation in India. And then I will sort of conclude with what we all can do collectively, how people have been resisting. Maybe I'll talk about one or two folks like Ayodhya very shortly. And then maybe I would recommend how Ambedkar King Study Circle and all of us can put our resources and make some initiatives so that we are able to stop this march of global Brahmanism in some crucial ways. So feel free to ask questions, and here we go. Understanding Brahmanism. As of now, I have not come across any serious definition of Brahmanism in any of the social sciences and humanities work, except one Sanskritist work, perhaps some of you might know. It's a powerfully titled book called How the Brahmins Won, From Alexander to the Guptas, by Johannes Bronkhorst. He's a Sanskritist. The title is just loved it, and I lapped it up, and it's around, every talk I'm using it now, How the Brahmins Won. So this is about the ancient time, and we have to talk about how the Brahmins have won in the medieval and modern times. And we have radical Marxists, radical thinkers, academics in our friend circle in the US, in Europe. We don't have a book on Marxism, on Brahmanism yet. We don't have, there's another book called Racism, written by a white man. And you can't count the number of white folks who have written on racism, on whiteness, white male power, and so on. But why haven't we had a book on Marxism and on Brahmanism yet, on Casteism yet, on Brahmin male power yet? So this is a question that all of us have to think about seriously. In fact, this problem of, so as I was, by the way, my PhD work is on Ayodhya. As I was writing my dissertation at Columbia in the early 2000s, and I found like no other thinker, in fact, in some crucial ways, more powerful than Periyar, attacking Brahmanism in a very systematic way. In a way, I find Periyar and Ambedkar following the trajectory of Das. So as Das was attacking Brahmanism, I was trying to use some anthropological or historical definition of Marxism to grapple with. So I couldn't have any support, a definitional support from any of our social scientists and humanities folks. So in a way, I took a page in my dissertation to talk about Brahmanism, how I think about and define. Casteism, another word that has not been defined yet, systematically. What does it mean? So I again defined that in my dissertation. And of course, now it's going to be out in the book soon. So this is what some of the points I've taken and put it across here. What is Brahmanism? Clearly, exclusionary religio-cultural, economic, and historical privilege of a minority caste groups called Brahmins. So they're not even 5% of India's population, but they clearly identify themselves as Brahmins in a way to push or whatever they call it. In a way, I think the metaphor is, this metaphor of Ambedkar is beautiful. Caste in India, his work at Columbia in 1913, he uses the metaphor called how the Brahmins shut the door and let the other castes emulate them, or force them to emulate. So the shutting the door, Brahmins, it begins with Brahmins. That's a powerful metaphor of Ambedkar. So they begin, that's what I mean by exclusionary. This is my religion, you don't come. You come, you are subordinate. So that's how this exclusionary religious, cultural, economic, historical, all of them operate. The class element also come in that way. And then to power to prescribe and proscribe, and non-Brahmins, very clearly, that means they're targeting 95% of the population, India's population, that includes Muslims. And today, by the way, the whole day I was in another conference in Trinidad, and I have my presentation midnight at 12 o'clock, Germany time. So I need to be really alert, hopefully. But so when I was going through some of the presenters, was the commissioner for Trinidad there, one Sahu, celebrates Ayodhya, and then how it includes all the faiths, he says. So our bureaucrats are propagating across the world like that. But who are the beneficiaries of Ayodhya? I have some slides later on. So that way they prescribe, and they include other faiths into the fold. So prescribe and proscribe non-Brahmins, how they should behave and so on. So no equal rights. There is no horizontal status. So that's very clear. That is about defining how the 95% of the people should behave in India. And then the establishment of systematized violence, the institutionalized violence very clearly, and then in all forms. Temple is supposedly a place of faith, but we know how the space is divided, segregated, right? And then the residence. So clearly not everybody can, there is agrahara, very clearly not everybody cannot rent or buy a place in some of those Brahmin localities. And of course, vegetarian, non-vegetarian, sex, education, work, land ownership, all of them are very clearly, if you're trying to breach that, you are violently put back in that low position, right? So that's what I mean by how violence, systemized violence, aiding this segregation. And then you have this, this kind of a social system has been normativized and naturalized. So like, these are norms created by Brahmins. And that has been very beautiful, like trees and rocks and mountains. We assume, yeah, people have been doing from ancient times. Like Anu said a few minutes ago, we have this privilege from ancient days. You can't give it up in the medieval time and modern time, irrespective of the human rights that you may talk about. We are different, we are privileged, and you are underprivileged or you are an untouchable. So that kind of normativization and naturalization has happened. And some of our distinguished sociologists, such as M. and Srinivas, have romanticized and naturalized this further through their concept like Sanskritization, as if an untouchable is dying to become a Brahmin male, for instance. He in fact wanted to use the word Brahminization. The fellow should have used the word Brahminization. Instead, he preferred Sanskritization. Maybe he was already expecting the backlash from some of the other sensible academics. So that way, it's a blatant legitimization. In contrast, I've shown you how Sanskrit like Johannes Broncos is beginning to point out, no, the Brahmins have done some damaging thing right from the ancient time. So that's very clear. Now, another thing, we've been using the word Brahminical patriarchy, and I think it's sort of circumventing things. So I want to pin it down by saying it is Brahmin male power. So clearly, the Cisco case, a Brahmin male, Shankar, I don't want to say the last name. I'm ashamed of such names, honestly. So the Shankar, Cisco Shankar, and the other fellow, they joined. Clearly, what were they trying to do? It's a Brahmin male. You very rarely come across a Brahmin woman behaving that way. So that way, my Brahmin male power has to be defined. We have white male power definition like that. We need to do that. It's not been done yet, so I'm sort of beginning that. So it's clearly a fictitious identity claim. Purush said, Brahmins were born from the head. You see, it's clearly a metaphysical, fictitious claim that all of us have been uttering, and then it's been legitimized, right? So, and it comes from Brahmin male myth and fabrication. And it's a violent imposition. So the tuft, the name, Iyer, Iyengar, Iyengar, and then you have the tuft, and then all the kind of the gods and goddesses, sculptures, the tradition, the tradition. Ayodhya, you have to reclaim Ayodhya. And modernity, IITs. So Cisco, Shankar, an IIT, Bombay IIT fellow, you ask him, he would talk about the importance of Ayodhya. He would talk about the importance of Manudharma Shastra. He would talk about the importance of Bhagavad Gita that is probably inclusive of untouchables as untouchables in his perspective. And that is Sanatani Dharma, you see. So he would do that. So it's a beautiful way of crisscrossing the ancient and modern to put the 95% of the people in subordination. So I want all of us to keep these conceptual aspects in mind before I move to the next slide. Okay. So here you go. 1920s, there was a case. This is connected with Cisco in some ways. How a Brahmin male can commit a crime and settle the case outside the court and get away with it. And so that kind of thing, in case Cisco case is going to go in settlement, I think we should be very, very alert. Alert to be, how do we settle the case outside? And what sort of implications would it have? We should be very alert. That is the reason I bring in this case from 1920s. This is about our good old president called S. Radhakrishnan. And as I was writing my book about Ayodhya, I was wondering, is there any concept called humanism in Indian philosophy? Because my hypothesis was this: if somebody has hammered himself as a Brahmin male in a very exclusionary way, that fellow doesn't have anything humanistic to connect with 95% of the population. Organic intellectuals such as Ayodhya clearly saw this through, and they were attacking Brahmin males. It is called Indian National Congress as Brahmin Congress. We'll come to that later. So they were clear. So Radhakrishnan wrote, was trying to do, and the best philosopher we ever produced was Radhakrishnan, they say. So I went through his book called Indian Philosophy, 2 volumes, which were written in the 1920s. I read through, and he was justifying things like Brahminical systems. There was no critique of anything connected with the Brahmin male power, Brahmanism, and so on. All of them are legitimized. Please read these 2 volumes. But the point that I'm driving at here is, more importantly, is this. His 2nd volume, he copied from his own student called Jagadnath Sinha. So, another privileged caste name. That's why I've darkened it. So imagine Radhakrishnan copying his own student's dissertation and publishing his 2nd volume called Indian Philosophy. Jagadnath got to know about it and filed the case. And it went to court in Bengal. And eventually, this fellow called, Shyam Prasad Mukherjee. Shyam Prasad was the part of the Nehru cabinet, and he resigned because Nehru was trying to do something for the Muslims. He didn't like it. So it's very clear. He was operating as a Brahmin male, and he had to rescue Radhakrishnan. So the case, Radhakrishnan was supposed to be pinned down. He was going to go to jail, I guess. Here comes Shyam Prasad convincing Jagadnath and settling the case outside. So a person who should have gone to jail eventually goes to Oxford as a professor of Eastern philosophy, and then finally becomes the president of India. And our Teachers' Day is in honor of India's, imagine Teachers' Day is in honor of Radhakrishnan. That is September 5th is coming. And so a plagiarist's name is celebrated as a Teachers' Day. That is the status of our country. And all this was done to save Radhakrishnan for only one reason. He was a Brahmin male. Let's get that clear. So that way, his work doesn't have humanism as I was trying to understand. So Brahmanism is sugar-coated. Brahmin male power is sugar-coated by Radhakrishnan. So, and then the concept Brahman and Brahmin, this is double entendre, right? They play around. There is a Brahman that you can't see and so on. And that's what I am. That also they say. So that's how they work. I think we should clearly, we should interrogate such Brahminical philosophical claims. Okay, and I want to move away from the slide with this note. By the way, Radhakrishnan hated his mother. That's because Radhakrishnan's mother fell in love with somebody other than her husband. This I read in the biography, and conceived Radhakrishnan, and that's how he was born. So this was known that she had a lover, and Radhakrishnan was the baby of that lover. And Radhakrishnan hated his mother till her death. But I'm very curious about who, probably we should all try to write about the biography of Radhakrishnan's mother. Hopefully the man was, because there's always been the privileged caste men's proximity with marginalized communities, men, intimacy, love, because the Brahmin men were exploiting, insulting the women for their menstruation and all kinds of exploitation. So they had a gravitation and sort of an attraction towards, clearly in my hometown in Tamil Nadu, I always heard about such stories. Oh, you know, he was born to that lady who had an affair with this man, who we call Dalit. And I have a problem with the word. We'll talk about that. So that way, Radhakrishnan is a very interesting story. I leave it at that level. Let's go to more important, connected with the US. This is Radhakrishnan, and he's with Tagore. Another guy we need to interrogate. Rabindranath Tagore's contribution to our humanism, I'm very curious. What would Bhadralok say about, you know, and then it's high time we understand his philosophy, whether it is inclusive or is exclusive, whether it is casteist, whether he was promoting his Brahmin male power with all the embellishments and so on. And so that's a nice picture. And then we'll go to the next one, 1920s. This is about US, interestingly. Some books where I was reading about racism, I stumbled upon this. There was an Indian called Bhagat Singh, and he lived between 1892 and, by the way, he had a Berkeley PhD. He went to the US Supreme Court, and the case is called this way. AKC members, please note this case, and you know, maybe we may have some ammunition to think about the Cisco case. So this case, 1923. So he was called as Dr. G, Berkeley PhD, right? Dr. G, and he was also known as Swami G. So he went to court to establish scientifically that he was entitled to US or American citizenship as whites, not as Africans. So you know already where he was heading at, okay? So Bhagatji was very passionate to somehow prove himself as a white man. And he relied on, by the way, strong scientific testimony that some South Asians were Aryans. 1920s, ladies and gentlemen. Hitler was just shaping his ideas here in Germany, where I'm sitting. Probably, that's what I mean. So the Aryan idea he promotes. And his lawyers beautifully presented the case this way. Here they differentiated, Bhagatji as a high-class Hindu Aryan, and he was different from the Aboriginal Indians. That means 95% of the Indians, I guess. Aboriginal Indians, by saying that these Aboriginal Indians in India, they are like Negroes. So Bhagatji was like a white man. The 95% of dark-skinned people or others in India were as, what Americans would regard as Negroes. So that's how he was doing. Thankfully, their case was defeated. But the point is this man planted the idea of Aryanism and Nazism in some ways. Probably he got the wind of what was going on with Hitler and in the Indians. By the way, RSS also was established in 1925. So the 1920s is a very interesting phase where I find Brahmanism and Brahmin male power and casteism of the privileged caste groups is very much anchored in a very interconnected way that we should be aware of. Dorothy Figueroa has a powerful book, please read, those who have not read. It's called Aryans, Jews, Brahmins. It was published by State University of New York Press in 2000. This was not prescribed by at Columbia or anywhere else because she clearly bashes up Brahmin academic people. So please do read, and I use this for my students here in Germany. It's powerful, and she points out, that's why I brought the book in here. She would talk about the interconnection between Brahmanism and the German and Nazism and so on. Very nicely back and forth. It's a useful one. So let me go to the next slide. This is Bhagatji. Even though he lost the citizenship, he knew exactly what to do. He married a white woman, has nice babies and so on. He named his son as David. Very progressive Swamiji, you see. And this is a beach picture of his from the 1940s. There are other pictures too. Have a look at it. So from there, I'm jumping to 2020s and rise of the global Brahmin male power. So that's exactly, so now, like, Anu said, and as well as Kali also suggested, how corporate America defends privileged caste Indians. They clearly said, when this case came up, the Cisco Shankar fellow case came up, Cisco intends to defend itself. They are clear. So this Brahmin white corporate connection is solidified now, but it's not unshakable. That's what we are here for, right? And so we have a lot more humanistic commitment to shake that collusion between the white and Brahmin male power. So Shankar, so that way, this is, by the way, these two guys, Shankar and Ramana, they are products of what Ajanta Subramanian, one of the very rare academics, Indian academics in the US. Ajanta Subramanian teaches anthropology at at Harvard University. Please do invite her for our for your talk here. She just got a book out, The Caste of Merit. And then before the 2015, she published an article. I used that article to teach students. I really got to know how, it's a powerful piece, 2015 article of hers. Ajanta Subramanian's article shows how a Brahmin male kid in Chennai feels already empowered going to a Brahmin school. And the teacher-student connection, camaraderie. And then how the student is clearly aiming IIT and they go in. By the way, IIT was meant for Brahmins. It was open for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in the early 70s. And still, they are, those SCSTs go in, they are killed. Okay, so in the name of merit and so on. So IITs, IIMs, they are all meant for Brahmins even now. Should we have them? And by the way, people like Warren Buffett, Google, you guys know, Sundar Pichai is an IIT fellow. And Microsoft is headed by another Brahmin male, I guess. So they're all doing great job. And you see the very clear connection between white corporate America and the Brahmin male power. Of course, there are Brahmin women to playing along. So I want us to keep that in mind. And clearly, they are operating as agents of Aryanism, like we saw with Bhagatji in 1920s. In 2020s also, they do. It's very clear, as I say. By the way, the Diversity Act of 1965 opened up the gates for Brahmins in a big way to flood America. It's very clear. We know that data is there. And in the 70s itself, we have a temple coming up. And by the way, I think now they are crossing already. We have, some 1,000 temples. I think they are nearing, they are nearing, and we need to ask this question: who are all the beneficiaries of a temple? And then clearly, the Brahmanism is promoted in every temple. Why Ayodhya is there? We're going to see that soon. But with every temple coming, who are the beneficiaries? Clearly, there is no Brahmin woman who's going to be the priestess. It's the Brahmin male. And so with every temple coming, if they are going to ruin the landscape, on top of that, they are going to clearly say, this is our god and goddesses, and you can come and you cannot come. They would prescribe and proscribe. In New Jersey, the temples, they were trying to identify a priest. They were trying to check his pedigree. Somewhere Iyengar intercaste marriages had happened, and therefore the guy was disqualified, they say. So we need to really see what is happening with each and every temple, and then they repatriate the dollars and euros. And so should we think about stopping the temples in the US? Enough of the Brahminical diversity. So this is a very important thing we need to take up. Apart from this case, Cisco case, all of us have to put our mind, should there be another temple coming up? And if it does, what does it do for other Indians? So should American landscape be ruined by these temples? These are the questions we need to raise. It's important we need to take it up. And by the way, the anthropologists and social scientists who have worked on Indian temples in America, they have not critiqued Brahmanism. They have all sugar-coated the temple culture and as part of the diversity program of the US. I can name many of them actually. So I was disappointed with all the work that have been done on temples in, outside India, and that's the case in India too. So American Brahmins as political representatives is happening right now. So you have Kamala Harris. We all know how she's biracial. Hopefully she takes up the question of casteism. I'm not very sure. As of now, I keep hearing she's talking about her race background, which is very right. And I also think her mom from Chennai seems to be a very reformed woman because she clearly married a black man. An Indian woman marrying a black man is very rare. Ajanta Subramanian's husband is a black man at Harvard. No wonder she took casteism seriously. Let's ask how many Brahmin men and women, our Indian academics, have married blacks? Please let us know. And at the same time, ask the same question: how many of our Indian have married white folks? This is very important. For the past 20 years, I'm observing this in the West. So we need to ask this question. Of course, in Britain, they all become political representatives too. So you have these names, right? You have Rishi Sunak is controlling the finance. You have Alok Sharma controlling the industry. Priti Patel is controlling whatever portfolio she has. They are all well placed. Now, would they take casteism, caste Brahmanism seriously? No. So clearly, I think more than US, UK has, Mira Danda is here in our group. She would tell us, she's part of the report, which produced how the institutionalization of casteism has happened in UK. Now the present government has pushed it out very clearly because of such folks such as Rishi Sunak, Alok Sharma, and Priti Patel, who hate their own parents. They ridicule their own parents who have come to UK as their own, as immigrants. So with these folks dominating, I see a very dangerous trend happening, that the Brahmin male second generation is also getting entrenched. They are using their citizenship in a way to promote Hinduism, acting back and forth across the globe, which is a very dangerous thing. But thankfully, we have people like AKSC, Ambedkar King Study Circle, sensitive anti-caste Indians. And, I've done work with Bal Murli, I've done work with Anu, we've done conferences on anti-caste. So we have like-minded folks. I think we just need to strengthen this, to how to really identify and struggle against. So we need to sort of, demand, how anti-caste folks should also have the representation. It's high time we do that in US, in UK, and elsewhere, or elsewhere in Europe and so on. Okay, so so now 2020, the American Academy is a very clear trajectory I see. So IIT, IIM's Ivy League. So this was one of the tragic things that I saw at Columbia during my own studentship, PhDship there. I could not come across a OBC. I could not come across a middle caste. Very rare. Very probably almost none. No, no OBC, I guess. So you don't have to talk about Dalits and Adivasis, right? So literally, I saw Brahmins, men and women coming from across different zones. So that was a very tragic observation. I still retain that. I don't think things have changed. So there is this beautiful, there is a book by Ira Katznelson at Columbia. He's got a powerful book on race. It's called When the Affirmative Action Was White. Please read this book. It's very powerful. I repeat, When the Affirmative Action Was White. So we need to talk about how the affirmative action is Brahmin, not was, is Brahmin, right? We need to write a book like that. And so there is this clear connection of Brahmin schools, IITs, IIMs, and Ivy League, and get plum job, and you can repatriate money and talk about the others, 95%, you can other them, right? So humanities and social sciences is more important here for me, that some of you may not know. And there are guys like Deepesh Chakravarti and Gayatri, Arjuna Padurai, Sumati Ramaswamy, all their proteges. I have serious problems with each and every one of them. My question is this. These are all Indians who have been here from the 60s. 1966, Gayatri landed up in the US. Has she written anything against racism, against casteism? Has she written any piece on Brahmanism? So, Deepesh Chakravarti, you don't have to ask. Provincialism in Europe, yes. How about provincialism in Brahmanism, sir? He legitimizes Brahminical concepts in his book. So, I'm not talking about the attack on him as sexual exploiter and so on. We're not even going there, right? But intellectually, he's been very prodigious. And all of them have spoken against racism, by the way. I've seen Gayatri hobnobbing with, black writers like Toni Morrison and so on. Great. But I think she should have learned from Toni Morrison to write against racism, casteism too, on Brahmanism too. As a Brahmin woman, probably she would have a lot more understanding of me as an anti-caste person, right? So Arjuna Padurai, so in his book, in the introduction, he clearly mentioned his dad's name as Iyer. I'm talking about his worship book and temple. And he didn't even know some of the Tamil months. It's not a typo. He didn't know. He messed it up. And he's a towering figure. Has he written anything on casteism so far? Has he written anything on Brahmanism? Some of my, anthropology friends have told me his great-grandfather or grandfather was a priest. Therefore, this worship and culture was basically to sugarcoat his Brahmin background. I don't know. We'll talk about that. And then, of course, Sumati Ramaswamy. I opened her book. It's called The Passions of the Tongue. When I opened the book, in the very first page itself, she identified herself as a Brahmin. I knew the book would be a trash. And this book was a joke in Tamil Nadu, Passions of the Tongue, 1994. Duke University Press, I guess. So, atrocious. And this woman, the moment she identifies herself Brahmin, why did she do that? That means she wanted to attack what is going on among the Tamils in the name of language. Clearly, it was a useless book. None of us benefited. It was a book of joke in Tamil Nadu. And she is a professor at Duke, and she was Ford Foundation Fellow, Ford Foundation Chief, South Asia Chief, between I think 2002 and 2005. And how many Dalits she would have promoted? How many OBCs she would have promoted? How many Brahmins she would have promoted? I can clearly tell you, she would have promoted 90% of Brahmins as Ford director. So there was a friend of mine who was a Ford director before called Goa Rizvi. Then he went to Kennedy Business School. And he said he sat in international fellowships, interview board in Delhi. So he told me, Goa Rizvi, he was an Oxford professor too earlier. He said literally every candidate's dad he knew, because it was some IFS, some IAS fellows, or some top politician's kid came for interview in INLACs, or Felix or other fellowships, Commonwealth and so on. And they are all there in Oxford, Cambridge, and US. So Goa Rizvi said, and then after him, Sumati Ramaswamy goes. I can clearly imagine who Sumati Ramaswamy would have worked for. So clearly, and they all marriage seems to be a beautiful alliance for them, strategic alliance. They get married to white folks. White folks are supporting Brahmins. They need some South Asian support. It's beautifully working. So for who does these people work? Have they done anything on casteism? We need to raise this question. That is the state of social sciences. And I speak here in the West, sitting here. I'm not sitting in India and bashing them up. I want evidence, right? So have they ever trained South Americans and African Americans to go and work in India? Why only white folks? It's time we ask this. And therefore, Wilkerson is a black woman. She has written something on caste. So I request the Indian friends who are academics in the US and Europe, please do recruit African American friends. We will have more productive time attacking caste and understand more about race. Please do send South Americans to do field work in India. We will understand. Lawrence Cohen's student from Berkeley, an African American, went to study in, of all place, the Dravidian land. And he was humiliated as an African American. He quit academics and went into software technology. That's the state of affairs. But we need to try that. Thankfully, we have Wilkerson to inspire. So that's about the social science and humanities. It's high time. So as of now, South Asian studies is run by the privileged caste, men and women, particularly Brahmins. There are 40% of South Asian studies who are all manning. Are we sugarcoating Brahmanism in the name of South Asian studies? We need to ask this question. We need to close the Sanskrit studies and Sanskrit chairs. This is happening in Germany. I'm glad they are doing it. I wrote a piece because it was the first Sanskrit chair in 1818 at Bonn University. Thankfully, I was one of the academics invited to write about this 200 years of Sanskrit. Obviously, my first question was, who were the beneficiaries of the Sanskrit studies in Germany for the past 200 years? Brahmin males mostly, maybe some Brahmin women, right? So do we need that Sanskrit chair? Thankfully, at Göttingen University, they are closing Sanskrit. I'm very happy about it. Many of us are. Likewise, in the US, it has to be done. Sanskrit chair is a nice way to promote Brahmin male power, Brahmanism. So we don't need that anymore. South Asian studies, yes. And it has to be manned by clearly anti-caste folks. It's high time we do that. Enough of the Brahmins running the show. That's what I say, so we need to do this. So we need to file case against any social science job that is coming about in the name of Sanskrit. So please write to any university and ask if there is a job ad, are you going to recruit an anti-caste person or yet another Brahmin person? please do ask this question. We need to do that. Now, in contrast, I would support, instead of South Asian studies as a one homogeneous thing, I want clearly, as I'm showing here in this slide, I want vernacular studies. In the name of anti-caste folks, so there should be Ayyangali Malayalam studies. There could be Birsa Jharkhandi studies. There could be Ayodhya Tamil studies. Clearly, this vernacular is meant for the anti-caste folks. And this is not yet another way of, for example, Telugu. The more Brahminical it is, the Telugu is celebrated. Atrocious. I asked Telugu friends, it's high time you de-Brahminize your Telugu, right? So that way, we need to promote this vernacular studies. And so, here is a picture that I want to go and probably quickly wind up. This is the picture from Ayodhya, right? Recently, Bhumi Puja. Now, who are the men sitting here? Some of you know. And I would like to ask some questions. What sort of caste groups these guys are? Are they privileged? Or they represent 95% of the people? What language do they speak? All regions are represented there? So these are the questions. And what caste groups do they belong to? So these are the questions. This picture is important. Put this picture in the class and ask this question. Let's see whether we can have a debate. Now, probably, look at this very clearly. There's a Brahmin man with a turf and a sacred thread, visibly shown to show who he is, I guess. But I'm interested more in this guy. This guy's name is Mohan Bhagat. He's heading the RSS organization, which was established in 1925. So what does he do? What does this organization do? We don't have enough books on them. We need to highly work on it and expose them. And what caste does he belong to? I guess he's a Bhagat, the last name we know, right? Last name is a beautiful badge for us to socially capitalize ourselves as privileged caste group to make money and jobs and so on. So Mohan Bhagat ji, what does it do? Here is the symbolic thing. So look at Mohan Ranji. This is our progress of our republic in the last 70 years. He is wielding a stick and he's a very fit man. Hopefully his part, belly doesn't break his back. Stick wielding is very much needed, right? Is it to shoo away the animals or to kill our own fellow Indians who are 95%? High time we ask this question. And that's how they do it. What is the implication of this progress? It has led to this. You tie the native, as our Bhagatji called, aboriginal Indians, right? Negroes. These are Gujaratis. People who skinned a dead cow were tied and beaten. I want you to observe this picture very carefully. Look at the spectacle of it. There's a plumpy, nice boy enjoying. There's a woman enjoying, all of them. So these men have been tied and he's breaking their bones. And without this man's influence, I don't think this boy would do it. Let's make the connection of violence. And if at all the men were not tied, I think just 4 of them can tackle all of them. This is our war of justice, our justice of war. Justice of war. This is how you fight, martial arts. Yeah. So this is very interesting. And so I connect clearly with this previous picture. You teach them how to use stick and young people will do it for the sake of casteism, Brahmanism. And next picture is even more interesting for us to watch. Please have a look at it. Don't shy away. This is reality. It could be a Muslim's family. It could be a Christian family. It could be what we call Dalit family. How is this man's brother's body is different from mine? You need to humiliate. This could be my mother, right? Who is supposed to de-blouse. And this sister, she's using a baby to cover her organs. This is not ancient days. This is in India. And I think we need to hold these men responsible for this kind of violence. And this boy who is watching is going to do the same. Is this what we're teaching? And this is not some UP or Bihar only. This is happening in Tamil Nadu too, our progressive Dalit, Dravidian land, right? Where we had Periyar and Ayodhya. So this kind of thing, look at the power of this brother who is suffering, who's been made naked, yet he holds on to his humanity and power and holds on to his self-respect. So should we talk about it in social sciences and humanities and anthropologies? Or it's too emotional, but too passionate, right? You don't have to, but this is reality, friends. We need to tackle it. So this is similar to Ku Klux Klan. Our fellows, use sticks, and here is they use the noose, and it led to this kind of family festivity of hanging and lynching the African Americans. So it was called family festivity. Trains were allowed to go to see the witnesses. African Americans suffered sexual mutilation. That means they cut somebody's penis and thought, hey, I cut an African American slave's penis. Here you go. They museumized these organs. And look at the festivity and the mood and all that, the giggle they have, men and women and children. So this is similar to that. So there is a clear connection between Ku Klux Klan and RSS. It's high time we talk about. So in that sense, this is my last slide. Resilience of the oppressed. The very fact AKC is there is because of the resilience of the anti-caste people. I congratulate you, brothers and sisters, for doing this. You can never be broken. We've been doing this for long, from ancient days. People will continue to resist caste because it's a question of 95% versus 5, right? It will continue. So it's high time we de-Brahmanize what we do. Ayodhya did that. And as I said, he called Indian National Congress. In 1885, Indian National Congress comes up. 1891, he calls it as Brahmin Congress. He already knew what was going to happen in the Republic. Brahmins controlled, Nehru family controlled. Now you know how many Brahmins control the Indian government. So Tas saw that through. He called it Brahmin Congress. And he was supporting Indian indentured labor to go out of, which I call, it's my own phrase, immigration against caste. He said, go away. And they did it. And I'm doing field work in the Caribbean right now to get into understanding Indian diaspora in the Caribbean. So from 1834, Indians moved out and they are all doing well. And there too is casteism is coming back, but there are anti-caste folks too, about which I'm planning to write. So we need to have towards ex-Brahmanization. And AKSU should take the lead of bringing the second generation Brahmin young people. We have hopes in them, like Kamala Harris. Work with them, tell them about Brahmanism, anti-caste principles of the majority of the people, anti-caste organic intellectuals. Excuse me. Anti-caste organic intellectuals should be taken seriously. And there is this condescension whenever we talk about Dalit intellectual, organic intellectual, so on. So they have to be, I think the second generation should be trained in that, even as we ex-Brahmanize them. Okay, so that way, a vernacular community formation is that there is this Tamil organization called FETNA, Federation of Tamil Association, in the US. Are they anti-caste? I'm not sure. So we need to check that. And then there has to be a global anti-caste movement, incorporating South Asians, Native Americans, and African Americans, South Americans, and so on. I'm glad there is a close friend of mine called Adriana, is there part of our group. She is a great thinker. She is from Puerto Rico. And I'm glad she is trying to connect the race and caste question also. So that way we need to have a solidarity of AKSC should take the lead to connect with BLM, Black Lives Matter movement, and then connect with the Dalit Solidarity Network so that we come up with a program of anti-caste global movement to challenge the global Brahmanism. I stop here. Sorry, I took a little longer. Thank you. Vielen Dank.